All right, well, if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. Everybody ready?
Yes.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Lawson Porter, and I'm the project manager for this team. And joining me today are my teammates Andrew Powers, Hatem Alsayed, and Patrick Dougherty. We've had the pleasure of working with Open Avenues this semester, and our primary point of contact has been Jeff Hairston, who is the training center and operations manager at Open Avenues. This semester, we've had the pleasure of building a system that hopes to automate the pairing of clients to job opportunities based on a quantitative assessment of skills and abilities. So we're going to start with just a little background about who Open Avenues is and what they do. Then we're going to get into some of the conceptual design behind our system, and then we'll kind of show what the system looks like implemented within a tool. And so I'll go ahead and pass it off to Hitem for a little bit of background on Open Avenues.
Uh, Thank you, Lawson. So, Open Avenues is a profit organization located in Rogers, Arkansas, that provides many different services to various clients. The clients that Open Avenues serve are adults in the Northwest Arkansas region that have any kind of diagnosed disability, whether it can be cognitive, physical, or any combination of these. Open Avenue's main goal is to enable these various clients through a variety of purposes, such as classroom things, working within the Open Avenues facility, and working various community jobs that these clients can get matched up with. Clients can Open Avenues every weekday using a bus transportation system that Open Avenues employees provide. The various locations of the clients throughout the Northwest Arkansas can be seen on the figure on the right side of the slide. Some of the more challenged clients will start in a classroom settings where employees will ease them into into a work environment before actually participating in any actual activity. Clients then work in the open in the Open Avenues facility, and Open Avenues has many different partners throughout Northwest Arkansas area that provide sourced work ranging from recycling thousands of cardboard boxes to assembling various products such as a ring snuggie or PB pallet holders. Once a client has demonstrated that they are ready to take a next step in their work life, clients are moved into a community jobs where they are placed into community jobs around the Northwest Arkansas area. There are two different segments of the community jobs sector that will be discussed in the next slide.
Thanks, Hatem. All Open Avenues clients typically begin their involvement with the organization by working within the facility where they'll receive on-the-job training and education related to employment, which can include things like learning how to establish a work schedule and learning how to meet with managers and receive feedback on job performance. And the time that clients spend in the facility really varies according to a couple of things, mainly the extent of their disability and the speed at which they demonstrate successful job performance. So some clients will actually choose or need to remain in the Open Avenues facility for their entire time with Open Avenues, never actually branching into community jobs. However, it's definitely a goal to get as many clients as possible into community jobs when they're ready. And so when clients are deemed ready by the Open Avenues staff for community jobs, and then they also show an interest in doing so, they will work with a staff member at Open Avenues, the community employment manager, to search for applicable job openings in the community for that client. And these job openings are typically found using online job platforms such as Indeed. And when clients begin these community jobs, they will receive assistance from a job coach who's assigned to them by Arkansas Rehabilitation Services for 3 months. During this time, Open Avenues will also be in contact with that client and provide assistance and ongoing communication to try to promote the client's success in these roles. So the performance of the community employment system at Open Avenues as it currently stands, sometimes and more frequently than they would like, leads to unsuccessful job placements. And an unsuccessful job placement is defined as a job placement where the client is not able to maintain that job for at least 3 months. And the reason that this is deemed unsuccessful is at that 3-month period, that's when the state deems the client in a more permanent role, and Open Avenues actually receives a stipend from the state of Arkansas. So if clients are not able to maintain those jobs for at least 3 months, it's deemed as unsuccessful both for the client and for Open Avenues. And so after some stakeholder interviews and independent research, our team identified 3 main concerns that lead to these matching problems. And these are the concerns that we are trying to address with our project. So the first of these is the job identification process. And so going straight to online job platforms like Indeed can make the search a little too broad and vague, as you're just looking for all openings rather than specifically looking for openings that cater to a specific client. And these clients definitely need more specific evaluations of different jobs to be placed in those. The second, which is probably the most significant issue, is that the client assessment is not actually integrated into the community job placement. And so I'll take a brief aside to describe what the client assessment is. It's essentially a diagnostic performed by the Open Avenues staff on clients when they arrive to the organization. It's an assessment of a client's abilities ranging from physical abilities like strength and stamina to cognitive abilities like problem solving and arithmetic, and even to interpersonal abilities like communication. And we will show these assessment categories later in the presentation. And so since these client assessments are not actually integrated into the community job matching, it means that the staff and the client don't really have a good idea of whether or not that client is specifically suited for a community job that they're evaluating, because these jobs typically don't show a lot of information on the specific ability requirements. And then finally, the data collection practices within the community placement can also lead to matching issues. The main reasons are that the client assessment data is not closely tracked and maintained. There's not really a database that's kept up with of relevant job opportunities for their clients. And there's also little historical data on the actual job placements and success within the community job segment.
Success in supported employment is measured similarly to the success of any other employee. However, the job coach provided by Arkansas Rehabilitation Services assists in measuring those things as well. For the sake of Open Avenues, a successful job placement is determined by the client's satisfaction with their new job, their productivity, and the length of job retention. As mentioned before, A successful placement for the client is 3 months. Whenever that period is over, the job coach will no longer be provided by Arkansas Rehabilitation Services, and Open Avenues receives a monetary stipend for that. But Open Avenues has found that it takes most clients about 6 months to become fully acclimated to their new routine. So they stay in contact with them. And if the client is performing well and they're happy with their job, Open Avenues knows that they have a successful job placement. So throughout interviews conducted with our contacts at Open Avenues, we have identified 4 primary groups of stakeholders. First are the Open Avenues employees and administration. Of course, it's the mission of Open Avenues to help clients, adults with disabilities, find jobs in the community, as well as in the training center. Additionally, whenever Open Avenues has to devote a lot of time in defining a client's job with the undefined process, they often are taking resources away from the training center, which is also a large part of Open Avenues' income and production support. And finally, for Open Avenues is the support by Arkansas Rehabilitation Services. Whenever they find a successful job, they get a stipend for that. The second group of stakeholders are the clients themselves. Of course, whenever the client holds a job successfully in the community, it's a huge sense of achievement for them. It's a source of income. It's the first step into independence for all people. And so whenever we are able to successfully place a client in a job, it is very good for them, as well as their family, who are the next group of stakeholders. Often the guardians of these clients are their family. And so whenever a client is not at work, they're usually have to be taken care of by the family. And so whenever a client gets a job successfully, it has a huge emotional impact on the family as well as the client. And finally are the community employers. These employers have a unique opportunity in Northwest Arkansas to help close a gap in the workforce. Currently 82% of adults are unemployed in the United States as of 2020. And our tool will help lower that gap. Additionally, whenever a client is successful in their job, it often lifts up the whole community and the place they work. So these employers have a unique opportunity to employ hardworking employees with a social cause behind it.
So once we established what the problem actually was and had our interviews with the different stakeholders, our team established that in order to build the system for Open Avenues, we were going to create a tool. And so for the tool, we established 3 overarching requirements that the tool needed to have. The first being functionality, the second being a database-driven tool, and then finally a tool that has a good user interface for users at Open Avenues to interact with. And so within each one of these overall requirements, there are sub-requirements that make up the overall requirement. And so going to functionality, there's 3 components within that. The first being the quantitative matching algorithm. So this is just meaning an algorithm that will actually use some quantifiable data and will match it with occupations based on that quantifiable data. The second sub-requirement being the fitting of the assessment with this external occupation data. So with this occupation data that we find externally, we want to be able to scale the assessment data and the occupation data onto the same scale so that those two can be aligned in order to create quantitative matches. And then the third requirement within functionality being the ranking of relevant opportunities. So we want to allow Open Avenues users to see the actual hierarchy of jobs and see which occupations are the best fit for specific clients in a order based on the actual fit. The second overall requirement being that database-driven aspect of the tool. So there's 2 different components within this, the first being occupational data incorporation. So as I mentioned, we want to be able to incorporate some kind of external data that has quantifiable numbers on different occupational requirements for different skills and abilities. And then the second component within database-driven is the client assessment record storage. So we want the tool to be able to actually record client profiles. So whenever Open Avenues enters in the client assessment scores, We want the tool to be able to store this so that they can see a client's progression over a certain period of time, and so that they can continue to track that assessment data for specific clients. And then the third overall requirement is that user interface. And so there's a few different components within this. So the first being the facilitation of user forms within our tool. So we want the user to be able to enter the client data and then edit the client assessment data using a form so that it's as easy as possible for them to do. The second component is the error prevention. And so we want to be able to create a tool that prompts users whenever they're entering in values outside of maybe the scale for different assessment categories. We want to be able to prompt them on the right scale that they should be using. And then the final component is the instructions. So we want, within our tool, we want there to be instructions so that any user at Open Avenues, whether they've used the tool before or not, can easily pick up the tool and be able to know how to use it effectively for their cause. And so to kind of establish the design of the system, we used a methodology called perceived user value, which Dr. Carl Schubert was a huge part of establishing for us. And so each in this chart below, we have 3 different alternatives with the ideal, the current, and the proposed alternative. And these are all measured against the 3 main requirements that I mentioned on the previous slide, with those being, again, functionality, the user interface, and the data-driven aspect of the tool. And so as we can see, the ideal represents a tool or an alternative that has maximum scores for each of these different requirements. And so it will meet the maximum PUV of 10. If we look over at the current alternative, this is what Open Avenues was currently doing. And so it kind of demonstrates just a lack of an organized system or tool for this community jobs placement section. And so since there was not really a tool, there wasn't really a user interface, there wasn't much functionality, and then there wasn't a collection of external occupation data for the community jobs matching. And then finally, the proposed alternative is what we think that we can do within the time period of the class. So this 640 hours here for the development time, this is how much our 4 team members have if we're putting 10 hours a week for 16 weeks into the tool. And so while we recognize that we won't be able to get to the ideal levels for each of these requirements, we do think that we will be able to significantly improve upon the current alternative within these 3 requirements. And so at this point, we're going to get into a little bit about the external data that we found, and then what we actually did to create the tool within Excel's VBA. And so I'll pass it off to Patrick to go over a little bit about the data.
Yeah, so early on, as we began the system design process, we realized that if we wanted to develop a tool to effectively match Open Avenues clients to community jobs, we would need some kind of standardized, verified source of job data that we could match to, that also included ability requirements for each job so that we could actually integrate the client assessment data into the matching process. And so this need was met by the discovery of the ONET database. So ONET is a government-sponsored online program that is free to everyone, that contains a regularly updated database of nearly all occupations you could imagine within the United States. And the great thing about ONET is that for each occupation, it provides a lot of detailed information about the tasks that are involved with the job, any knowledge that is required to complete that job, and most significantly for our purposes, it actually lists the abilities that are required to perform that job and the extent to which they are required. And so if you look on the screen here, you'll see an example page for the dishwasher occupation. Up the top, you have kind of just the header information and then some of the tasks that are involved. Then if you scroll down on the page, you'll actually come to the abilities section. And so this is really important because, as you can see, it spells out each of the abilities that are required for this occupation and the level, which is the number on the left, to which they are required. And so it lists all these abilities in a ranked order from highest to lowest, and it actually quantifies how much that ability is needed for that specific job on a scale from 0 to 100. So this was a huge discovery for us, and really kind of sent our project into the next phase where we could actually develop a process to match clients to these jobs using this very valuable ONET database.
So after finding ONAT occupations database, we needed to look deeper into each category that they measure for. Could be able to align each category that they have with the categories that Open Avenues assesses for. So after reading descriptions of each category, we were able to align the skills and abilities in the both assessments and the database. As you can see in the slides, they are all color coded, and also another important thing to notice here is that they use so Open Avenues uses a different scale in each category, where the ONA job database uses a straight scale from 0 to 100. And we will be talking more about this scaling in the upcoming slides.
So our tool has three primary points of functionality. First is the client data entry form, which you see on the screen here. In this form, the user at Open Avenues will take the assessment scores straight from as they're written down on the assessment, and they will enter them in the boxes, including things like the client's full name and their contact info, as well as the scores from the assessment. And then when they're done, they will click the Create Client Profile button, which will enter a new entry into our client assessment records, which is a database on the tool, which the Open Avenues staff will be able to view at any time. Additionally, these forms are complete with plenty of error checking to ensure that our algorithm can deal with the numbers we have set in place, and it follows the guidelines as mentioned in the last slide by Hatem. The next point of functionality is the Edit Client Profile form. In this form, the user will select a client that already exists in the database, and they will change any necessary info. Of course, this would be used whenever client's phone number changes or address changes or something like that. But more importantly, it is used to update the client's profile whenever they take the assessment, as most clients take the assessment several times per year. And the third and most important form is the matching form, which will again pull a client from the client database and compare them with compare their scores with the occupation data that we have in our ONET job database, which is in our form as well. And then when the Open Avenues employee clicks match, it'll run the algorithm and spit out the desired number of jobs.
So in order to perform a more accurate matching experience, we decided to convert the Open Avenues assessment score to be in the same scale as ONA jobs database. The method that we are going to convert Open Avenues score is by getting the ratio of the given score to a client, and then divide it by upper bound in that category. The ratio will give us a value of from 0 to a 1. Can we multiply that ratio by 7? For example, if a client receives a full score in any given category, then the ratio of the received score and the upper bound of that category will be a full score, which is 1. Then multiplying it by 7 will give us a full score in the scale of 0 to 7.
After the scaling procedure was determined and outlined, just as Hatem showed you, it was time for us to actually develop the matching procedure, which was really the core of our tool's functionality and the main thing that we wanted to provide to Open Avenues. And we did this through developing it in Microsoft's Virtual Basic for Applications, which is essentially a programming language that is compatible with Microsoft Excel. So we'll just kind of walk through the matching user form, and then I'll describe sort of what's going on in the background. So in the top visual, you can see the user form that will actually be shown to the user at Open Avenues, and that will be used to execute the matching procedure. And so at the top, the user will select the client from the drop-down menu. And all these client names are actually coming from the client data sheet, which has data entered into it through the form that Andy showed earlier. And so when they click select client, all of that client's assessment data and information will be stored and converted to make sure that it is compatible with the ONET ability data. And then after the user has clicked select client, they will then click match with occupation, and that's when the matching algorithm is actually executed. And so the methodology that it follows is displayed at the bottom of the screen. So on the left, you can see kind of just a dummy client with some made up assessment data that has already been converted to the ONET scales and translated to the ONET ability categories. And so these assessment scores will then be iterated across the associated ONET ability requirements for an occupation, which you can see in the middle for dishwashers. And then that client's assessment data will be compared to the ONET ability requirement data using a percent match formula. So essentially, we're just trying to determine for each of these abilities how well that client matches the requirements for that specific job. And if they are at the requirement or above it, they're given a score of 100%. And so then on the right, you can see that this percent match is determined for every single ability across that client and that occupation. And then after it's gone through all abilities, of which there are 13 in our case, it will actually make a percent average match for that entire occupation by just averaging the percent matches for each ability. And so after it is determined this percent average match for the occupation, this process will repeat for every single occupation within the ONET database, of which there are almost 900 different jobs. And so at the end of the process, every single occupation is given a percent match for this particular client that we're evaluating. And now we'll move into what happens next with those actual results. So after the average percent match for that client has been determined for each occupation, it's really just a matter of taking those results and sorting them and returning them to the user so that they can be used to help these clients find jobs. And so what we're left with after the matching procedure is essentially the entire database of occupations and the percent match of how well that client matches to each occupation. Now, what's most important to us and to the Open Avenues user is to see the jobs that the client is matched to most closely, because those are most likely the jobs that they want to look at for matching. And so in order to sort this long list of data, we used what's called bubble sort algorithm. Essentially how this works is it takes in a list of data, which in this case are the percent matches. It looks to see if the second data point is higher than the first data point, and if it is, it'll switch those two values and then proceed through the rest of the list. And so this process repeats over and over until the entire list of data has been sorted so that we have the highest percent match jobs at the top of the data set. From there, it's just a matter of pairing those percent matches with the jobs they're associated with and printing those results out to the user. You can see an example of that over on the right, where in this case, the client has been given the highest percent match to the dishwasher occupation. And so from here, Open Avenues can really take these occupation results and use these to further specify the job search for that client, to find jobs that they know are suitable for that client's abilities.
So now that we walked through some of the back end stuff that goes on within our tool, we'd like to give just like a quick demonstration of what the tool looks like in practice. And so when an Open Avenues user opens the tool, the first thing that they're going to see is the main menu. And so this main menu has 3 different buttons, one for the client entry form, one for the client edit form, and then also for the job matching form. And so when they open the client entry form, as we've kind of walked through on the left here in this left-hand column, they're going to have some personal information about the client. So they'll enter in the client's full name, things like their home address, phone numbers, and just personal information like that. And then in these middle and right columns is actually the assessment column. So we have the assessment date and assessor, followed by the different categories that Open Avenues assessment assesses for. And so one thing, as we mentioned, we want to incorporate some error checking. And so if a user, for example, tries to type in a category for a number that is outside of the range that it should be, it will prompt the user with a message box saying what the actual range should be, and they'll have an opportunity to go back and correct that mistake. And so since they're all on different scales, since all the assessment categories are on different scales, there'll be different scales that it prompts to. And so again, it will prompt the user to enter in a number that is within the valid range for that specific category. And then from there, once they enter in all the information here, they will click the Create Client Profile. And then within the tool, there will be a client profile database. And so within this database, we just have some fake clients right now, but just for the sake of the tool, we can see that in these left columns over here, these are color-coded yellow. So these represent the personal information that we talked about. The columns that are in the green, the columns highlighted in the green represent categories that are assessed on the assessment and that we also found a direct alignment with within the ONET database. And so these were ones that were able to actually be used within the matching algorithm to match up with the skills and abilities, the respective skills and abilities from the ONET external data. And then finally, the categories in the red are categories that are assessed for, but we weren't able to find a direct alignment within the ONET data. And so these are kept within the client profile just for the sake of Open Avenues being able to see what these scores were and to be able to keep track of these. But for the sake of the matching algorithm, they won't actually be used. And so the next form here, the next button we have is the client edit form. And so this will pull up the client edit form. It looks very similar to the client entry form. The only difference is instead of actually creating a client profile, there'll be a drop-down list there at the top left where they can select the client that's already been created, and they will just purely be editing the data that already exists for that client, as opposed to creating a completely new client profile. And so the process will be the same. They can go through and edit whichever categories they want to, and that will edit that within the client database. And then the last form here is the matching form. And so again, they'll be able to select the client from the drop-down list that exists within the client profile. So they'll select this client, and then the next box here is the number of jobs. So this they'll select the number of jobs, the desired number of jobs that they want to see the specific client matched up with. So for the sake of this example, we'll choose 10. And then from there, they'll select this button that locks in their selection, both for the client name and the number of jobs. And then they can hit the match with occupation button, which will then trigger the code to actually work in the back end and then From here, the overall matches for the top 10 jobs and the occupation titles for these top 10 jobs will be seen, and Open Avenues will be able to see these top number of matches for this specific client. So at this point, we'd like to just talk a little bit about the impact that we envision this project having for Open Avenues. So as Andy mentioned earlier, employment for people with a disability within the United States is a pretty big problem, with 82% of the people with disabilities unemployed. People with disabilities need a very specialized job process, a job placement process, since they need jobs that specifically cater to their individual skills and abilities. So we believe that this tool will be able to help Open Avenues clients accomplish this. And so based on some estimates that we have, we think that this tool will lead to an increase in clients retained for Open Avenues between 10 to 35%. And so based on the number of clients they usually place in a given year, this would lead to an extra 4 to 14 clients. And then, as we mentioned, Open Avenues receives this funding from Arkansas Rehabilitation Services, which is what makes the client retention so important within this segment. And so we envision that this tool, again, using the numbers that we've used, would lead to a $22,000 to $77,000 increase in funding. And this funding is really huge for Open Avenues because it allows them to not only invest within the community job segment, but continue to invest within their facility and continue to further the mission that they're trying to accomplish for adults with these disabilities. And so just to kind of summarize up everything that we've talked about today, we've been working with Open Avenues this semester. They're an organization that employs adults with disabilities in a number of ways. They enable them in a number of ways. They provide different employment training, both within their facility and externally within the community. And so our team has designed a system that utilizes this percent match algorithm, and it quantitatively measures and aligns the skills and abilities of clients with the external occupation data that we found from ONET, which is a government-sponsored database. And then finally, our team envisions that implementation of our system and our tool is going to lead to an increase for the client retention within the community jobs segment, and this will lead to additional funding for Open Avenues from Arkansas Rehabilitation Services. And so at this point, we'd like to give one more big thank you to our industry partner, specifically Jeff Hairston, for working with us all year long and being available for us to kind of bounce everything off of, and just giving us the opportunity to kind of learn what Open Avenues is and learn about their great mission. So at this point, I'll pass it over to Jeff, if you wanted to just give a few words about what this system could mean to you guys, and maybe a little bit about the mission of Open Avenues for anybody on the call that doesn't know already.
Well, guys, again, thank you for all the effort that you put in to this project this year. I was sitting in here with our program director and community employment director. So while we were muted, we were having a little bit of discussion about different parts of it. The tie-in with the ONET database, I think, that was a huge find for you. So kudos to you for going down that road and then finding a way to match each particular client up to it. We're looking forward to the hands-on part of this so that we can get familiar with it. Our program director here, Wayne is one who will be using that more so initially, I believe.
As clients are coming in.
As new clients are coming in. So again, I appreciate the fact that you were willing to take a project that we worked on a couple of years ago and take it way farther than what we had already done. So I'm very, very happy with the work that you've done and the output from the project. So thanks again, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you, Jeff. And I would open up to any Q&A, but I think there's only about 5 or 6 of us on the call. So if you guys have any other questions, let us know. I know we've been working on the tool just a little bit more, kind of fine-tuning this stuff, but we'll probably be emailing or sending the tool over to you at the end of this week.
Right.
And so if we need to set up a meeting with you guys to kind of walk through, how it works, but the goal is to, make it as user-friendly as possible. So we're happy to, help you implement it and everything, but should be pretty friendly to use. But looking forward to letting you guys use that for sure.
Well, I sent a note to Dr. Cassidy yesterday, thanking him for letting us continue to be a part of this program, and just how amazed I am. It seems like every time we do this, I'm just more and more impressed with the students that are involved. So I don't know what the university's doing, but whatever it is, it's right.
Sure, pass it along, Dr. Cassidy. Well, I think that's going to conclude everything. Like I said, we will be in communication with you about passing over the tool with you, or to you. But if that's all, if that's everything everybody has, we can go ahead and finish. And Jeff, just to let you know, I mean, I know you've heard this presentation probably 3 or 4 times now. So we will be having a poster session the rest of the day. The link to that is on the website. If for some reason, you want to come by and hear our elevator pitch or see the demonstration of the tool, absolutely no pressure to do it, because like I said, you've seen everything quite a few times now. But
When
what was that?
when is the next part of it then?
So that will be in that room, in the Zoom virtual room, from 1:30-ish to 4 p.m. this afternoon. So it's a
Teams,
what was that?
got all the different teams doing that?
Yes, it's all different teams. So you're also welcome to stop by any of the other Capstone teams and kind of hear about their presentations and stuff. So
If you don't mind, if you could just, share with us briefly, what have some of the other teams been working on, just as a comparison for what you all have been doing?
Yeah, there's a few teams working with some transportation companies like JB Hunt. There's one team that is helping Baptist Hospital in Memphis. There's 2 teams with Baptist Hospital in Memphis working on their emergency room, like triage system, and the doctors like checking up on them. Projects are pretty interesting. There's some people working with Nestle, group with Art Best, JB Hunt. There's a group somewhat similar to ours. They're working with a company called ISS. They're from Italy. They've got an interesting project.
Well, hopefully you all have had the most interesting one.
yes, no, I think we feel like we've had an opportunity to make a big impact, and it's been great hearing about everything that you guys do. So I think ours has been really special in that regard.
All right, well, I will look to just hear from you in the next couple of days so that we can start putting this thing into use.
Yeah, for sure. Sounds good. Well, I appreciate all you guys for stopping by today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we'll talk to you guys.